So we're back there. Shout if it disappears. I don't know what's happening here. So we've got these two rams. It's the EBVs are telling us, are kind of giving us comparison of how different we can expect their progeny to be. The other value that you're given, and people often ask me what this is, it's the little number that you get below the EBV in the reports, is the accuracy of the EBV. So that's giving you an idea of how accurate that EBV. So it's kind of about risk, really. So here I've got an example.
Sorry, Janet, which slide should we be looking at? It might be mine as frozen, perhaps.
Accuracy of EBVs?
No, what, Kerry, what do you see on your screen?
Yeah, I've got accuracy of EBV's example, and then it's got example of muscle depth.
Oh, right. Oh, there you are. Yeah, oh, it's loaded with me now. So, sorry, Janet, I'll let you carry on.
Okay.
It's my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I think we all seem to be having a few issues tonight. So we've got two rams here with very similar EBVs for muscle depth. One's got one of 1.04, the other's got one of 1.08. But what they differ in is the accuracy. So the top one here has got an accuracy of 89%. The bottom one's got an accuracy of 76%. And I kind of put a wider bar around the bottom one than the top one, because what the accuracy is telling us is, you know, we think the EBV should be here, but it could be anywhere in this kind of region. Whereas this one, we've kind of got a wider margin of error where the EBV could be. So it's about risk and management of risk, really, that accuracy. When we look at the information that's fed into the EBV, that kind of makes sense, because this top one, he's got his own record of muscle depth, and his sire and dam have been measured for muscle depth, but he's also got 45 recorded progeny. So we've got a pretty good idea of his genes. Whereas this bottom one, he's also got his own record of muscle depth, and his sire and dam have got records, but he's only got one recorded progeny. So we've got some idea about his genes. So he's a reasonable accuracy at 76, but just not as good as the one above. So those accuracy figures kind of give you an idea of how much you can rely on that EBV. Now, at the moment, because it's your first year recording, your accuracy levels are going to be low. And they're going to be particularly low for the maternal traits, because it just takes a bit of time for those to build up. So you need to take your EBVs with quite a big pinch of salt at this stage. You'll get better accuracies and be able to rely on them more as time goes on and you build up information. The kind of analogy for it is, I often think it's like a jigsaw puzzle that we've kind of put together to get the whole picture. So we're trying to find out about this EBV, the genetics of our sheep. And we've got various bits of the jigsaw that we can help to get a good picture of that. At the moment, we've only got some of those bits. So at the moment, for your lambs, we've got measures of their own performance for their growth, and their muscle and their fat, because Ros has scanned them, which is really good. What we haven't got is on the females, we haven't got a measure of their own performance for the maternal traits yet. And then we've got, for your lambs, we've got one measure of their mother's performance, but over time, we'll get repeated measures of that. And every time we get another measure of that, it's going to tell us more about her genes. So at the moment, we've kind of got this piece, but it's a bit sketchy at the moment, and it will get better over the next couple of years. Then another bit of the jigsaw is the performance of relatives that are telling us about the animal's genes. And again, we've got some of that. We've got brothers and sisters of the lambs, and they're telling us quite a bit about that lamb's genes. But again, as years go on, we'll get heaps more of information there, and this piece will become clearer and clearer over time. Then we've got the performance in related traits, which information pulls in to tell us about the EBV. So we know that some of the genes that influence the growth of the lamb will also influence its muscle fat depth and its fat depth, and vice versa. And so using those relationships, we can kind of improve the accuracy a bit of the EBVs of all the traits. So we've got that for some of the traits, but not for all of the traits yet. So again, that piece is there pretty much, but it will improve. And then also there's kind of performance of parents, performance of progeny that are making another piece in the jigsaw, making the whole picture come together. And again, as I said, we've only got one measure on the ewe at the moment, and the sire, he wasn't actually measured as a lamb unless you've got rams from performance recorded flocks, which both of you have. So for those sires, we're getting a reasonable picture here, but you've got other sires where this picture isn't quite there. So it's like a jigsaw that we're putting together, but some of the pieces are still a bit sketchy, and they'll get better as time goes on, and we'll get a better picture of the EBV. So looking at the actual flock report and the bits you get, the one thing that you should always be aware of is the evaluation date, and always try and make sure you're using the latest report you can get, because that's the most up-to-date one. So the latest evaluation was on the 7th of November. So that will be the most recent figures you can get. So you probably should be looking at that one. Just don't look too much at earlier ones, because I know both of you scanned quite late. So it might be a while before your data's come in, but it will be in that November one. So always make sure you've got the most recent report. Then the information you've got on there, you've obviously got the ID, the sire, the dam of the lamb, all there. This next column here gives you the birth and rearing type. So this is telling me that these 3 lambs were all born as singles and reared as singles. So that's just there to help you when you're interpreting it. The number underneath is the number of progeny. Because these are ram lambs, they don't have any progeny. But when you look at the EBVs of your ewes and your stock sires, you should see some nice healthy numbers in there. And that's quite useful when your ewes are getting a bit older, because you'll see how many progeny they've actually produced. Then we get their actual measurements, the scan weight, muscle depth, fat depth that was measured. So, you know, we can see that this lamb was the heaviest of these 3 at scanning time. And their age in the next column. The little number above the age is the management group. So these were all in the same management group, which has been coded as 1. That's something that's just worth checking, because if you've got lambs in different groups immediately before scanning, so maybe some were on better grazing than others, that's obviously going to have affected their growth. And to level the playing field when we're comparing them, that needs to be taken into account. Now, when Ros came out and scanned, Ros is very meticulous about this sort of thing. She will have asked you, have these been in different groups? And she will have recorded it, so that was passed on. But that's something, it's always just worth checking that if you had lambs in different groups, that is reflected there, and you're seeing different groups marked. But as I said, if Ros did it, or Sian did it, I know they'll have been on that, and they'll have got that right.
Janet, we had Dion do the scan for us, the fat scan. I can't remember him asking that question.
Right. Okay. Were they in different groups?
The ewe lambs and the wether lambs were split.
Okay. So, yeah, in that particular case, one Dion should have asked, and we'll remind him that he should ask.
Yeah. Well, he may have asked, and I might have answered, but I can't remember him asking that specific question, if you know what I mean.
Right. And hopefully in your report, the ewe lambs and the ram lambs will be marked as different management groups.
Right. Okay.
But if they're not, don't panic in that particular case.
Right.
Because the ram lambs and ewe lambs tend to be treated slightly differently in the evaluation anyhow. Because obviously the rams grow a bit quicker than the ewe lambs. So it actually wouldn't make much difference to your evaluation.
Right. Okay.
If you hadn't got that identified.
But in future.
Yeah.
Then
just
yeah,
keep an eye open for it.
Yeah, actually. Yeah.
And if you have a check, I don't think I can see that in your report. But
no, they're not. They've got them all in the same group.
Okay, I'll pass on to Signet that they should have been in different groups.
Yeah.
And then we can just make sure it's right.
Yeah. Because we split them at weaning
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
the groups.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, that's something to look out for in the future, and we'll remind Dion as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Then the next lot of numbers you get in here are the EBVs. So you've got the actual EBV on the top, and then the accuracy below. And you'll see the accuracy here for mature weight, litter size are quite low, because there's not a background of information on the ewes that's feeding through to that. So you'll probably see very low values there in your reports as well, but they'll get higher next year and even higher the year after. So that will build up in time. So at the moment, when they're very low, kind of 26, 27, I would take it. I really wouldn't worry about those EBVs at all. I'd almost ignore them if they're down at that rate and look at the ones with the higher accuracies. And don't worry about them because the accuracy will build up on those. And then at the end, we have the index, which is the overall ranking. And again, the accuracy below it. So the average in the Welsh is 127. So anything over 127 is above average. This bottom one here, and we saw it was actually a small lamb at scanning. That's got an index well below average in this particular report. So if we look at the individual EBVs, that 8-week weight EBV is telling us about the lamb's potential for early growth, so its own genes contributing to its growth. So I think that's always going to be an important EBV for people, to identify those lambs that are getting themselves off to a flying start, the ones that do really well and catch your eye early on. That's obviously going to improve your weight of lambs sold and obviously your carcass weight as well. So that's one's going to be quite important. And that should be reasonably reliable because your lambs have all been weighed at 8 weeks. And as you can see here on Bedweir's report, it's reasonable accuracies there. So that's quite a good guide to the lambs that are getting off to the flying start. The next one along is the mature size EBV, that mature EBV, which tells you about the ewe weight. So for these ram lambs, it's really telling us about their daughter's potential for adult weight in kilograms. So the higher the values there, the higher weight the ewes are likely to be. So if you're happy with the weight of your ewes, you want to be looking for those to be around 0, so it's not changing very much. If you're quite happy for the ewes to get a bit heavier, probably don't worry about it too much. If you want the ewes actually to get smaller, you need to be going for negative values there. And again, you've got weights on your ewes now, so the accuracy of this will be quite a bit higher next year, and it will increase year on year. Then we have the litter EBV, which is the EBV for litter size. And that's telling you about the ram's daughter's potential for litter size. Higher values are daughters that have more lambs. You won't see a huge amount of variation there at the moment because, again, as time goes on, you'll get higher accuracy and you'll be able to pull them apart more. At the moment, because the system hasn't got much information, it's kind of being very cautious about everything and saying, oh, everything's about average because I don't know. But as it knows more, it will pull them apart. How you use that EBV depends a bit on where you are in scanning at the moment. So if you're scanning below 120%, going for higher EBVs for that litter size EBV is likely to mean that you increase your scanning percentage a little bit, and you actually, the effect of that's probably going to be mainly that you have fewer empty ewes, which can only really be a good thing, because all your ewes then are pulling their weight. If you've got a scanning percentage currently kind of between 130 and about 150, 55, ewes with higher EBVs or breeding for higher EBVs for that litter size EBVs, likely to mean that you get more twins. So the orange here is singles, the grey is twins, and as you move up this, you're likely to get more twins being born. Now, some people will say they don't want that, and some hills might not support that. But remember that if you're doing this and you're recording your sheep on your hill, and you also look at that in conjunction with the maternal ability EBV, what you should be doing is selecting ewes that can support twins on the hill. So it's a case of slowly, but you can slightly increase your proportion of twins and make sure that you've got ewes that can rear them by combining selection for the litter size EBV and the maternal ability EBV. It's really only if your scanning percentage is currently above 160 that if you select for positive litter size EBVs, you'll start increasing your scanning percentage a bit more, and you'll start getting a few triplets creeping into the flock, which you might not want on the hill. But even then, we've got hill flocks scanning at about nearly 170% and still a tiny proportion of triplets. So that might not worry you. You might be able to get triplet ewes in by somewhere and kind of manage them specially. So, thinking about that litter size EBV just depends a little bit on where you are now, how you go forward with it.
Sorry, can I just clarify something?
Yep.
At the moment, I've they've obviously got low. Sorry, I'm just looking. I'm trying to find which page it is on. At the moment, it's like low, and they're like minus or 0 something.
Yeah.
Figures. So 0 is like that's what we want if we wanted to maintain it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Right, that's okay. And then okay, that's fine. Yeah, I've got that clear. So minus then would be that's not a good thing. So we need
minus to take your scanning percentage down, which you don't want to do.
No, that's okay.
Positive would take it up, but 0 round about then is going to keep it about where it is.
Right, that's great. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So our next EBV that we get in the report is the maternal ability EBV, and that's telling us all about the ram daughter's potential to rear lambs well to 8 weeks. So those good ewes that are good, milky, look after their lambs, get them off to a flying start. So usually the sorts of ewes we want. And it's kind of measured in kilograms of lamb that they're getting to 8 weeks. So again, in most flocks, I can't really imagine a hill flock that wouldn't want that to be improving. We all want good ewes. So looking for positive values there is quite an important thing. It's going to breed you ewes that are going to rear heavier lambs and do more of that. They're more efficient. They're grazing better. They're converting it to milk, getting it into their lambs. So doing exactly what you want them to do. So that's quite an important one. And as I said, particularly if you're improving litter size, that's kind of showing you the ewes that can do it on your hill. And that's one of the big advantages of kind of recording, is that you're measuring it in your farm and identifying the sheep that can do it for you in your situation. Then we have the Scanway EBV. So that's all about the lamb's potential for growth to the kind of that point at scanning. So whenever they came out to scan for you, which hopefully was about when you were thinking about beginning to sell lambs off the farm. So, in terms of weight of lambs sold, carcass weight, that's really quite an important one. The higher that is, you're going to have a higher weight of lambs to sell, so more value. You're also going to increase carcass weight with a higher value there. So that's, quite a good one to increase, unless you are in a situation, which I know some hill flocks are, where they're actually hitting the top spec in terms of carcass weight and they don't want it to increase much more. Then next one's muscle depth. So that's all about the muscling of the animal. And we know that animals that have higher muscle depth EBVs tend to get higher carcass weights. They also tend to just start nudging up the grades a little bit. So you kind of start getting less R's and more O's, maybe even better than that. Sorry, other way around. Less O's and more R's, and maybe even some U's. So, your muscle depth is quite important. If you're selling dead weight, it's going to increase your carcass weight. Your fat depth EBV, that's all about the lamb's potential to lay down fat. So get some finish on them. So if you have problems finishing lambs, you want to go for positive values there. If you have problems with lambs going too light, getting finish on them before they've got to the weight you want, you probably want to go for negative values there. So, you can kind of use that to manipulate your carcass weight and grade a little bit. There's also some evidence that certainly in some farms, the lambs that have a higher fat depth EBV tend to grow into ewes that will carry more condition and hold their condition. So I'd always caution about going for a lot of negative values on fat depth, because you want your ewes to be able to carry condition and get condition back on after weaning. And we associate that with kind of higher EBVs for fat depth, but we also know muscle depth EBV is important for that. So better muscle ewes seem to be able to do that as well. So a lot of people will say, well, with fat depth, I'm probably going to try and stick for ones that are around 0. But some people might want to increase it if they're worried about getting ewes back in condition, etc. The next 3 columns we have, or 4 columns here, are all traits that some breeds record, but they're not recorded in the Welsh Mountain at the moment. So these are some that are measured by CT scanning, whole body scanning, which breeds like Texel and Suffolk will do. And then the FEC one is the fecal egg count for worm resistance, which breeds like the Llyn do. So they're not ones that are recorded in our populations at the moment. Maybe in the future they will be. And then finally, we've got the Welsh index there. So that's the one to look at. You've probably all looked at the Signet website, but I wanted to just kind of draw your attention to some of the reports about the breeds that come under these latest breed results. So if you go on the website and click on that, it takes you through to a page where you can select your breed. So you select Welsh Mountain. And then it gives you some reports. So it's still got, well, when I took this screenshot, it still had the catalogue up from the sale in September. That may have come down by now. And then it's got the benchmark for the breed. It's got a list of top ram lambs, a list of top shearling lambs, top stock sires, and somewhere where you can find other flocks that are recording, which can be quite useful. So the breed benchmark, that's quite important for you. That's showing you where the breed average is, and where the top 25%, bottom 25%, and so on is. So as I said, the average index at the moment is 127. Your own flock benchmark is probably more important for you. So it's probably worthwhile this year just getting an average of your rams, your ewes, and your lambs, making a note of it for each of the traits. And then you can monitor against that in future years and see whether you're moving in the right direction and what you maybe need to put a bit more emphasis on. So, kind of think about that and think about monitoring your progress as you go. That's the one for the hardy and Epping speckle. You get the kind of leading stock sires, for example. So these are the leading stock sires at the moment. So we've got some hardy Welsh up here at the top, and then some improved Welsh here. So they all get mixed up. And we've actually got one of the cohort 1 flocks, Gwion, has got one of his stock sires has come out 4th in that. It's an unrecorded sire that's got phenomenal growth and muscle. So, even the unrecorded sires will get recognised and will get pulled up as being good in this. If you put the UK number of an animal into the quick search on the website, you can pull up this graph, which can be quite useful to look at the EBVs just in a kind of picture way. So this is that particular ram. You can see he's got really good scan weight and muscle depth, but he's really quite lean. His 8-week weight's good. Not much information on him on litter size and maternal ability. So that's kind of being really cautious and hanging around about the average there. So for your stock sires, it might be quite nice just to go in and see what they look like, because it can mean a lot more like that than it can just these numbers in a row, can't it? So in terms of using the reports, I think I'd say use them with caution at this stage. The accuracy will get better and they'll become more useful to you. In terms of ram lambs, I don't know if you're aiming to keep ram lambs for yourselves to use or keep ram lambs to sell, or both. But my general approach to ram lambs would be use index to kind of draw up a long list. So probably only think about things that are above average index for your flock or above average for the breed if you're thinking about selling. So kind of think about that first, then have a look at those. And if you're thinking about them for your own flock, having kind of sorted them out on index, then take out any, discount any that have got low EBVs in the traits you particularly want to improve, so that you know you've got something that's good overall and good in the traits that you want. Or if you're thinking of selling rams next year, you could always put those in a selling group, because just because it's low on a particular EBV, that might be fine for someone else. That might be exactly what they want. So, you know, just consider that. And then having kind of got quite a long list, quite a fair group to choose from, I would then just select on type and functional traits within that short list. So then, you know, you're making sure you're kind of ticking the, right, I'm getting it going forward on index, I'm getting it going forward on the traits I want, and I'm getting the type and correctness that I want coming into my flock. So different people will do it different ways. A lot of the people who've been selling rams for quite a long time kind of do this the other way up. They'll select on type first, then look at the EBVs and index, and you decide what they're going to use in their flock, what they're going to put into particular sales. So different ways of doing it, but kind of using the two things together. For females coming into the flock, so ewe lambs and yearlings, at the moment I really wouldn't worry about those EBVs and indexes too much. Just give it a bit of time for the maternal information to build up in your flock. So next year that information will be far more useful to you. And this year's ewe lambs next year will have the benefit of their mother having lambed again, and some brothers and sisters on the ground as well. So their EBVs will get more accurate. So you might be able to use that in terms of what yearlings are coming to your flock next year. But my general approach with those would be not worry about the top so much, but take out the bottom end. So cull out the bottom end, the bottom 20% perhaps on index. Then you know you're not bringing the kind of shockers on index into the flock. And then for any lamb that's below average index, what I always say is that lamb may have a place in your flock, but she's got to be bringing something else. So if she's pretty ordinary and got a below average index, I'd be sending her down the road. If she's got a below average index, but she's really good looking, she's really correct, you like her type, then fair enough, she's bringing that into the flock. Okay. And similar for females that are above average index. So that's ticking the boxes in terms of genetics and performance. But if she's not good type, or a type that you really don't like, or she's not correct, then she hasn't really got a place in the flock. So you kind of balance the two things up against each other. And as you go above average index, the balance becomes slightly different. For ewes, again, I wouldn't even look at EBVs on ewes at the moment. Give them a bit more chance to prove themselves. But when they have, so next year, your ewes that have been recorded for 2 years, you will have a bit more information on those. You can maybe look at indexes and use them to cull or draft out the bottom end. Maybe put them into the unrecorded flock if you've got one, or something like that. So use them in that way. But again, aiming for the bottom end rather than concentrating on the top end, because by taking out the bottom end, you're upping your average all the time. For stock sires, I think you should be using the index to help you make decisions about those, if you can, and individual EBVs to make sure the traits you want are going in the right direction. So kind of using those to cull or keep. And always ask yourself, when you're looking at stock rams, can I replace it with something that's either better on index or better on type, or ideally both? And with stock sires, I think we can often get hung up on individual animals. And really, we should think of our stock sires as a team. They're a team that are bringing genetics into our flock. And we never win a rugby match with a team of forwards or a team of backs. We win rugby matches with a team of forwards and backs that work well together. And it's the same with stock sires. You're going to get your flock to where you want it to be by having a team of stock sires that are good on kind of performance traits in terms of EBVs and index, but also good on index and type, on type and correctness. Now, it might not be the same animal that has both of those attributes, but if you've got them in the team, you're going in the right direction, and you'll eventually get, or it's not even that long down the road, you'll get animals that have got both index and the type you want. And once you get to that stage, things get a lot easier. So, you know, it's thinking of the team in terms of the stock size. So it is for the ewes as well, really, but it's easier to think of a smaller team of stock size. So that's kind of all I really wanted to say.